I think the primary focus, right? I mean, you as a consumer, the main things that you're really concerned about is, is my money safe?
That's right.
And I think Kucoin does all the right things to ensure that, people's money is safe, that the cybersecurity is, held to a very high standard.
Welcome to another episode of the Unicorns podcast. I'm your host, Justin Kelly, and today the focus is on cryptocurrency and Kucoin. Our guest is the Kucoin Australia MD, James Pinch. Kucoin, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world with more than 40 million users, has officially doubled down on Australia. The company has opened a new headquarters in the heart of Sydney, invested in local talent, and is preparing a major rollout of Australian-first product offerings. In this conversation, we'll explore why Kucoin has chosen Australia as its next strategic hub, what this means for everyday investors, and how the business plans to bridge global crypto innovation with local regulatory expectations. The business has also signed a new global ambassador, superstar Australian golfer Adam Scott. So if you're into crypto and would like to find out how Kucoin is looking to shake things up, stick around. James Pinch, welcome to the program.
Excited to be here, Justin. Thanks for having me.
For our listeners who are new to the world of crypto and Kucoin in particular, can you tell us about the platform and how it works?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's a number of different products, so I'll try and keep it in its most simplistic form. The reality is you've got these cryptocurrencies basically, almost like a security, right? When you're trading your stocks, this is probably the closest example I think most people will be able to relate to. You have the exchange, basically a broker, where you can come in, you can buy different crypto assets. Where it probably deviates a little bit differently, where you would have your securities platform and a cash management account, you've got a wallet. And that's quite literally the only difference. Obviously, it's built on, probably more advanced technology. I've had the opportunity to work in a securities business before, and they're definitely not as advanced.
Yes.
But look, that's probably the closest way to give an example of what cryptocurrencies actually are. You can start to look at other products, and I know they've got, a lot of exchanges got more exotic offerings. You can talk about your crypto perps products or futures products. You can talk about earn, all of these other things, but I think it starts to get a bit more complicated for your general retail consumer.
Kucoin, how is the platform used? Do people just come in, they buy, they sell Bitcoin, they're just trading assets? Do they come in for a day? Yeah. Do they hang around? Do they? How are they using the platform?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think Kucoin's sort of unique in the sense that it is a larger sort of ecosystem. So there's people with completely different agendas, right? You've got your general consumers that are sort of like buy and hold, right? Mm-hmm. These are people that have just got an interest or a keen interest in having some exposure to crypto assets. So there's people that could just see, look, I think Bitcoin's going to continue rising, or ETH, for example. And that sort of represents your general retail market. And then you've got, sort of more sophisticated people that are more intraday trading. They might get some exposure to your crypto perps products, where, these are things that are leveraged. You've got to probably pay a bit more attention to them.
Okay.
It's not a case of just sort of buying and holding. These are things you probably need to monitor day over day. And then you've got, guys that are probably a little bit more sort of passive in the sense that, they want exposure. They don't really necessarily know, what they want to invest in, but they're sort of happy to just have a bit of a look and go, okay, great, I like this. I just want to go into this earn product and get some sort of yield. So I guess it really depends on the individual and what they're actually trying to achieve. And the really cool thing with Kucoin is that it actually caters for all of these different types of people.
Yeah.
And look, I know, when we start to talk about Australia, we've probably got less offerings than that. But, when we look at Kucoin as a global product offering, you've got some other really cool products like Kupay, which is basically like an e-commerce solution where you can actually go in and transact on an e-commerce website through crypto. Something that's really cool. Then we've got other products like your Ku card, so you can actually derive or pay with your crypto balance. So it's really cool in the form of a card, right? I know these are sort of gone electronic now, and you can put them on your phone, and I think that's something that's really cool for the industry, that you're able to tie all of these sort of traditional products back to your DeFi products.
And can you see that innovation continuing with new products?
Look, absolutely. I think probably where we're at now is we're starting to enter this sort of arena where it's becoming a little bit more complicated in the sense that we're starting to introduce regulation. And look, this was always going to happen. It's not like I sort of actually had an interesting conversation with someone the other day who was from an investment banking background. And when we look at the sort of early 2000s, I had this sort of conversation of the guys that were in FX and CFDs were seen as the pirates of the industry.
Yes.
And now we're sort of fast forwarding and we're talking about, the crypto products coming in, and I think the traditional financial services guys are sort of looking at the crypto guys now, and it's probably actually more the FX and CFD guys saying, oh, look, it's the pirates of the industry. And look, I think I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's sort of interesting to see that sort of evolve and start to work out, how legislation sort of plays a part in these products, how they become more complicated. And then I guess the people that are operating these exchanges, how that changes over time too.
Yes. So if I wanted to become a Kucoin user, how easy is it, James, to set up an account and get going? What's involved in that process?
Here I was thinking you already had an account, Justin. Look, very, very simple. You can download the app. It's just a basic registration. Depending on which types of products and services you're trying to access, you might go through a bit of a different onboarding process. But generally, spot products quite easy to access. You go through general registration, go through a standard KYC process like you would with your bank. It's probably a little bit easier coming into a crypto exchange than going into a bank. But then when we start to talk about your crypto derivatives products, there's a couple more questions that sort of reflect the complexity of the product, just to make sure that these products are actually suitable for what you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
So we don't want to be backwards and coming forwards about, these products are not necessarily suitable for all retail consumers.
What do you know about the people who are using the platform? And when I ask that question, are they predominantly men? Are they predominantly women? How old are they? What's the age range? What are the demographics of your users? And I suppose, because I know there are a lot of them, both the users in Australia and how that might differ to those overseas.
Yeah. Look, it's actually a really interesting point. I've been looking at these metrics quite closely over the course of the last month, especially bringing these products to market. And what sort of really shocked me, my initial thoughts sort of coming into crypto around that sort of 2024 arena and having some sort of background in consulting for exchanges was that a lot of the focus or at least adoption would have come from millennials. And look, whilst that's largely true, what I didn't expect was that Gen X actually plays a substantial portion of adoption into crypto assets, and actually less so Gen Z. So I thought, surely Gen Z would play a huge part of adoption into these products, being a little bit more tech savvy. These products can be sort of I guess when you're sort of looking at things that are new, generally the younger generation tends to adapt to those products a hell of a lot quicker than when you start to look at older generations. But what I thought was actually equally as interesting is that whilst we have this hyper concentration of users in Millennial and Gen Z or Gen X, we also still have considerable adoption from people that are sort of part of that boomer generation. So I think it sort of reflects that, whilst an older generation now, that generation also had significant exposure to technology and is able to adapt to new products coming into the market.
They've probably also got a little bit more money.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably definitely a market you want to target.
Yes.
But I also think, from a Gen Z perspective, it's important in terms of an asset class because the entry point is so much lower than any other asset class, right? When you start to talk about, trading your traditional securities, the entry point can be quite high to actually generate any sort of return on investment. And then you look at other things like property. I think that's been no secret. It's quite impossible, even for people in the millennial generation and above, have found it quite hard. So this sort of gives that younger generation the ability to be able to get some exposure to generating some sort of interest on their investment. And then going back to your point, Justin, around the male or female, we're very surprised to see. I think when you sort of start to talk about a lot of these investments, you get a lot of male dominance in these things. But surprisingly enough, we had a huge concentration of female investors too. And I think that's quite cool. Like even when you start to look at events like the ACC, we had a number of people, that were male, female, boomer, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z. It didn't really matter.
Everyone in between.
Yeah. And it was interesting to hear different takes too, like where sort of people's interests have come from. I had, and I'm not sort of saying that this is a great idea, but had a gentleman, would have been around 60s, maybe early 60s, come up to me and say, I'm 100% in crypto. And I was just like, oh, that's a high risk strategy. Yeah. I don't know if I would do that, but yeah, look, and it just, it's interesting to sort of see how people have different perspectives, but different agendas in these different asset classes.
You mentioned the ACC. I also came along. I thought it was a terrific event. How did you find it?
Yeah, really, really good, really informative too. Probably one of the key takeaways that I had from the event is, we always thought that, we're probably a little bit sort of preemptive, and we're starting to adopt a regulation, starting to try and piece all of these pieces of the puzzles together. Or let's say try and solve the Rubik's Cube by trying to interface all the licenses together. What I found interesting was that when you walk around the convention and you look at some of the chats and presentations, pretty much everyone was talking about the same thing, is that regulation is coming. It's not going away. And the landscape of the next few years is to try and resolve how this looks from a consumer perspective, trying to keep the products as similar as they could possibly be to where the current state is today, whilst incorporating regulation into the business lines. So that was quite interesting to see that it's actually not just something that we're internally looking at, it's something the industry as a whole is looking at. What I also found interesting, again, was actually around the age demographics. I really thought that it would be this sort of hyper concentration of, sort of 30 and below, or mid 30 and below, but it was cool to see that, it has adoption across the board. It's not just this hyper concentration of, male 30-year-old or anything like that. And with that sort of comes people's different experiences with crypto as a whole.
So let's talk about Kucoin. You have an operation in Sydney. You've now set up a big base camp in Australia. So what are the driving factors behind the decision to double down in Australia, and why now?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it sort of comes back to some of the previous points that I've made. Australia's always been sort of seen as that tier one jurisdiction, right? Especially when you talk about your traditional financial products. So I think for groups like Kucoin, it was always on the cards to have this sort of tier one licensing. Now, when I talk about Kucoin specifically, I think Kucoin's always been here, right? That's no secret. We've got a pretty drastic, gigantic user base here in Australia. So I sort of see it as not necessarily as a coming to Australia or doubling down, but more just evolving in the industry. We're sort of starting to see that regulations becoming a lot more certain. That means that you need boots on the ground. It's not as simple as sort of just operating it from a distance. You need people that understand the local laws, regulations, and how to bring these products to market. So I think that was a primary key driver for having people here locally and starting to build the team out.
And you, of course, bring extensive experience from traditional finance, corporate advisory, fintech, innovation. What was it that drew you to the role at Kucoin?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think for me, what's exciting about the industry is, for me as an individual, I am at a juncture where you're coming into an industry that is being completely reformed and reshaped. That means that people like myself that have the experience, not just the experience, but also the opportunity, get the chance to be able to shape what the legislation and regulation looks like. So it's a lot of collaborative approach to not just government, but also regulators like ASIC, for example, where you can start to put forward opinion about how these things should actually look. That's a really exciting opportunity for me. And I think it's just an exciting sector, right? The asset classes are changing constantly. The regulation's changing constantly. But also you get this opportunity to work with this hyper concentration of intellect too.
Yes.
I think that's been no secret that, crypto is very, very popular globally. But what it also means is that these exchanges, especially the global ones, have the opportunity to sort of cherry pick some of the smartest people that are out there in the market. So that's been really exciting for me.
Have you been able to do that, hiring good talent locally?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a great team in Sydney. Some really, really, really talented people that have come from either other exchanges or traditional financial products. So it's been cool to sort of get other people's take on how this sort of convergence is occurring. But yeah, like I said, there's some really, really intelligent people within the group.
In terms of the size and scale of Kucoin, I've got some notes here saying 40 million users globally, 360,000 Australians already using Kucoin. There's some serious numbers, James.
Yeah. Look, it's an extremely large exchange. Really excited about the opportunity to be able to bring the business to Australia under a regulated framework.
So what can Australian investors expect in terms of any unique products or a localized trading experience in Kucoin? Yeah,
look, I think KuCoin's obviously sent a pretty clear message bringing someone like myself into the game.
Yep.
I have a lot more experience when we start to talk about traditional financial products. With that also means that you'll probably see KuCoin bring a lot more products than our typical competitor here in Australia to market.
Okay.
So that's something that we're highly invested in over the course of 2026, is to make sure that KuCoin obviously has these fantastic products at a global level. How these products sort of localize will be my primary focus over 2026. So from a consumer perspective, that's what they can expect to see, is a lot more of the global products being localized into Australia.
The crypto market is evolving. It's also maturing. Investors are demanding transparency, stability. How do you go about trying to build that trust with Australian users?
Yeah. Look, I think there's a number of different factors, right? One factor is obviously the security part.
Mm-hmm.
It's no secret that KuCoin spends tons of money around securities, and it is, an industry where cybersecurity risk is, prevalent. What's been really cool, I've had the opportunity to be able to go overseas to some of the larger businesses globally. There's a massive team of cybersecurity experts. So I think that's one sort of aspect that they focus on quite heavily. But also bringing local experienced people, right? So making sure that, where KuCoin's operating in these local jurisdictions, they're complying with local laws and regulations. That's all, I think, the primary focus, right? I mean, you as a consumer, the main things that you're really concerned about is, is my money safe?
That's right.
And I think KuCoin does all the right things to ensure that, people's money is safe, that the cybersecurity is, held to a very high standard.
Tell me about the, so we've just had the golf, the Australian PGA finish, KuCoin signage everywhere across Royal Queensland. You made a big splash at the golf, and I noticed that you've signed up an icon of the game and an Australian champion in Adam Scott. A lot of buzz around that announcement. How did that come about?
Yeah, look, I think this was already sort of in a pretty mature state by the time I sort of joined the group. But look, what I sort of like about the partnership with Adam Scott is I think he represents a lot of the core values from the Kucoin group. Especially when we start to talk about the taglines being, trust, security, integrity, and all of these things.
Yes.
Adam Scott's obviously on brand for that. I think he's done a really good job in, not just his professional career, but also his presentation. And I think that's important for Kucoin as a group to align themselves with people like Adam Scott. I think probably other things that we sort of start to look at is, probably starting to partner with other people that are probably a little bit more localized in Australia that represents our target market a bit more too.
Well, he ticks all the boxes in terms of he's a global figure. He's well known locally. I think he's universally admired, and people can rely on him to always perform well. So
yeah.
I think you've nailed the choice.
I was very glad that they picked a global brand ambassador that's Australian. That makes our life considerably easier.
Cryptocurrency can be complex to newcomers. How do you go about the process of trying to make investing in cryptocurrency, digital assets, more understandable, relatable, and I suppose acceptable and accessible to the average punter who might like to dabble in crypto?
Yeah, look, good question. Look, I don't think it's as simple as just saying, how do you make it, sort of streamlined in a sense that it's accessible to other people. The reality is that there's products that actually probably shouldn't be accessible to everyone. And I'm just being upfront about that. And I think it is important that, some products need to remain complicated. That's just the reality. But whilst doing that, I think that, what's important for exchanges like Kucoin to work on is to make those things accessible or things that can actually be a lot more simplified, presented in a simplified way through UX. Now, a good example of what I'm talking about is your wallet infrastructure, your spot trading. That should actually be simple, but it should also cater for people that are probably a little bit more advanced. And that's where we start to talk about more institutional grade trading platforms and all of that sort of stuff that people that want a complicated experience and they want to draw their graphs and all of this sort of stuff, they've still got that ability. But then when you talk about a general retail consumer, it's easily digestible. So when you look at your simple trade, you can say, okay, great, I've got an AUD balance and I want to convert that to BTC, and this is how much AUD I have. It's really important to be able to cater to both markets. And then you've got your more advanced traders that can look at it and be like, oh, I want partial fills here and all of that sort of stuff.
Do you find with the app that people, like it becomes something, like, I suppose, like Facebook, that you're looking at it, all the time throughout the day? How's it going? Like, I don't know. Are people like logging on and quickly checking their crypto balances, on the bus at work, in the cafe line? How are people using the app?
Look, I think it comes back to that point about what products are you trading.
Yeah.
So you guys that are on your perps products, I really hope you're paying attention, and you really should. Whereas, your people that are trading more simplified products sort of see it more like a security, right? I think we're heading into a part of the industry where, a lot of those key coins are heading into maturity. They're behaving more like a traditional asset class, especially when you talk about B2C, right? When we look back historically, you could go through a day and see this all over the place, where it's sort of more linear. And I think that's important for a general retail consumer, is you're not exposing yourself to significant volatility. But it also means that people
is that a turn on or turn off for some people, seeing those wild spikes?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is what it is, right? If it's a turn off, then maybe look at your perps products, probably more interesting, because you've probably got an appetite for that.
Yes.
So people that are more interested in the volatility, they're probably educating themselves about the market a lot more. than somebody that's just like, I've heard this thing about Bitcoin. I just want to have some exposure to it. I don't want to put my whole balance into it. Then, and that sort of goes back to that point about making sure that the products are accessible for all different types of people.
Well, let's look ahead. We're at the end of 2025, 2026. What are some of the key goals that you are most focused on for Kucoin Australia over the next 12 months?
Yeah, good question. I think from my perspective, a lot of the key focus is trying to consolidate from an ecosystem perspective and starting to localise a lot more products here in Australia. Now we're starting to see the regulations becoming a little bit clearer. We can probably afford to start to look at some other products and interface them with other licenses. So that's something that I'll be focused on quite heavily, especially between Q1, Q2 next year. So expect to see additional products coming to market. The other sort of side would be, from our team perspective, we expect to see, some expansion with the local team here in Australia. I won't say specific numbers, but it's likely to be, drastically larger of a team here in Australia. Those would probably be the key focuses: is the ecosystem, products, and the local team. Probably the other thing is starting to play a lot more active role in community too. So there's be sort of VIP style events or even just events out to the general public, and then partnering with some let's say local icons outside of Adam Scott. We want to show that we're localizing properly. So part of that will be to partner with the correct people.
Well, we will watch this space with interest. James Pinch, Managing Director of Kucoin Australia, many thanks for coming onto the show, and we wish you well for the years ahead. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Justin. Excited to be here and talk about crypto.